All that food that you just worked so hard to cook becoming soggy. That feeling like you need to be with ninja reflexes at every single mealtime in case your toddler decides to just spill out their entire cup of water. We all know what that feels like. Most, if not all, toddlers go through this phase of spilling water. So today we're going to be talking about how to help our children move through and then out of that phase so we can have more peaceful meal times. If we haven't met before, my name is Holly. I am a pediatric occupational therapist, a mum, and the founder of Playful Pod, which is my play and child development membership community. Now, we're diving into this topic today because it is probably one of the questions that comes up the most within the Playful Pod community. So I'm going to be sharing some of the things that we've discussed there as a community, but I did want to let you know that before we dive in, if you are wanting to be part of a community of like-minded parents, really harness your skills as a parent and understand child development and this critical stage in our children's life really fully, then make sure to come and join up to the waitlist. Doors open only a couple of times a year and you need to be on that list to find out all of those details. Okay, so first question first. When should we be giving our children open cups? A lot of times I hear parents saying, well, maybe we've just offered a cup too early and that's why they are spilling water. Learning to drink from a cup is quite a sophisticated skill. If you think about the motor coordination that's needed to actually pick up a cup without spilling it, put it towards your face, coordinate that your lips and your hands are moving at the same time, and then be able to know how much to put into your mouth so that you can drink without swallowing, and then being able to swallow a bigger amount of liquid. It's all pretty refined and coordinated, and you'll probably have seen this a lot in social media, that there are definite pros and cons to different types of bottles, and we don't want to keep our children using a traditional kind of baby bottle with a teat for too long, and we also don't want them to be using sippy cups for too long. Actually, if we look more at the mechanics around your mouth, children don't really learn the skill that they need necessarily from sippy cups. So if you're wanting to just skip over sippy cups, you definitely can. If you follow Montessori at all, you'll hear there that they begin giving their children open cups and even glass cups from around 6 months, or the time that they start having their first meal. I would recommend that you go with whatever feels best for you. I'm going to put down in the description box some different options for open cups that are not glass that you might enjoy. But generally we say around 12 to 15 months is the time that we're wanting children to not need to drink from a bottle or a sippy cup at all. So by the time that our children are 15 months, we want to make sure that they are able to do that coordinated action of drinking from a cup. Some of the things that you might want to look at before you offer your child or your baby an open cup is, firstly, can they sit by themselves? Because if they're still really slouched and they're sitting, that drinking and coordinating the swallow is going to be a little bit more difficult. We want to make sure that they're able to hold the cup. Now, for some families, especially, for example, Montessori families that start their children with open cups really young, this action is often facilitated by the parent, so just lifting that cup. The other option is to also get a cup that has two handles and let them drink like that. And we want to, of course, make sure that they have adequate head control so that their chin is not pointing towards their body when they're taking a sip, and it's also not fully backwards, so that they're able to hold their head up in order to drink. But whether your child is 6 months or, in the toddler years, this spilling of water can happen. Specifically today, we are looking at children that are spilling water, not bumping water. So if your child is bumping over their water, you may want to just relook at whether having an open cup is a good fit for your family at this time, because it could just be that they're learning to coordinate their movements, and of course a young child that is learning still to sit up, their arms may flail and things may be bumped over. So let's look back at the spilling. Why do toddlers spill water on purpose? Really, because this is their job as toddlers, is to explore and learn about the world, and spilling water is super interesting. It's really interesting that this thing that is inside a cup actually can move, and it can actually spill, and then it creates mess, and then the food that looked one way becomes another way once it's wet. So there's a lot of learning that actually takes place within that spilling. And let's always remember that this is our children's job. Their job is not necessarily to keep our house always clean, but to explore and learn through that exploration. The other time that this often comes up is when children are moving through a trajectory play schema. Now, you've probably heard me talk about play schemas before. They are basically these ways of playing that we've seen children around the world do, these typical movements or explorations that children engage in order to do all of that learning. And trajectory is a specific one where children are interested in movement and watching movement. So that action of pouring water, there's a lot of interest in that kind of learning. So the reason that our children are pouring and spilling water is often a lot more linked to them wanting to learn and explore or play than it is to them intentionally doing something to make our house more messy. On the other hand, and this is something that I see, a mistake that I see parents falling into so often, is that they overreact when their child does their first couple of spills, and then it moves past being the motivation of play and exploration and actually moves into a stage where your child is doing this pouring because they are interested in the way that you are reacting. So let's move on to what we can actually do to stop and get out of this pouring stage, and at least have some confidence that at least 80% of our meals are going to be a little bit less messy. The first thing that I recommend for parents to do is to give lots of pouring play outside of mealtime. So if this is a play schema that your child is working through, or if there's something within this action of pouring that your child is really interested in, let's give them that opportunity. It's a great thing that they're learning to do this. That could be adding some cups to bath time and letting them pour water. That could be a sensory bin specifically, and again, it doesn't have to be water. It could be some dried beans, it could be some rice or rainbow rice, but letting them engage in that action of pouring and filling up different buckets or little things can be really helpful in kind of meeting that need so that they don't have to be doing it during meal times. Sometimes when I work with parents and we start talking about the reason for spilling water being linked to play schemas, they start to mention, oh yes, I noticed that he's really interested in also throwing things down the stairs. He's really interested in also throwing balls. He's really interested in pouring out the cat's food every day. So if this is a play schema, really think about including this in many different ways throughout your child's day so that they can get that exploration and that need of play met. Then when it does come to the actual mealtime and your child spills, that is a clear sign to us perhaps they are finished with food. I find with most children, either they do it really reflexively, like as soon as you put the meal down and the water cup down, and if that is the case, then you want to maybe stagger it so you're giving them water only at the end of when they're finished eating. But if it's like something that you're noticing always after they've taken a few bites, they start to spill their water, that's a sign for us that perhaps they're finished eating. And we can communicate this to them in a really open, gentle, non-explosive way to say, oh, you spilled your water, it looks like you're done eating, and then take the cup and the plate away. They may fuss a little bit after that because it's a sudden change, but if you are confident that they've had enough to eat, and remember, in the toddler years, apart from the baby years when they're really growing so explosively, in the toddler years they do eat a lot less. So if you're comfortable that you feel like they've eaten enough and that this is just happening at the end when they're done or bored, then really you can just take that away and say, it seems like you're done. Remember, with this, we want to really temper our response so that we're not getting them into that kind of cycle of being really excited by our big emotional outburst around their food. So in that way, sometimes cutting it off as soon as it happens also helps for us, that we're not then engaging in this cycle where we're like, I said stop spilling and then I gave you more and then you spilled again and I said stop and I just put you fresh food. Really, it could be that this is a sign that your child is finished eating for this meal. The other thing that I hear parents saying a lot when it comes to this idea of not spilling is, what do I do when they spill on their bed? Or now they are not spilling at meals, but they just spilled a cup of water on their sister's face while she was on the mat. So if we know that our child is going through a spilling phase, try to limit the amount of places that are available for them to spill. Now, that doesn't mean keep them in a baby cot or something like that, but your child doesn't need to necessarily have a water cup with them at every point of the day. It could be that you are wanting to encourage this drinking, so at meal times you offer open cups. And then at playtime or times when they are close to their baby sister, offer a bottle that has a straw in it. Straw drinking is also developmentally really good for our children, and I'll again link some of the straw bottles that I like below so you can check them out. But having that option can really help for you to feel comfortable that the spilling won't be taking place at that time, and then again to help break that cycle of big responses and your child getting excited about the way that you respond to them spilling water. Now, if none of this works, if you have tried what I've suggested and you still feel like it's been going for a few weeks and they are still really pouring a lot and it's becoming a big point of tension in your family, my biggest suggestion is to use something that I call like the 2-week block of changing things up. Sometimes when we do fall into these patterns, the best way that we can kind of break them is to just re-switch up the whole way that we do this thing, and especially when it comes to drinking and spilling water. So this might mean that you, for 2 weeks, decide that you're going to go back to a straw bottle instead of an open cup, just to kind of reroute or troubleshoot that behavior. It could be that you're going to decide that at meal times, you're going to separate the time that you have water and food available, so it's not being spilled. I've even suggested for parents at some points to do like a completely not bat an eyelid approach to this kind of behavior, especially if it's fallen into like quite a routine. And that would be that you are offering the open cup less, but that when it is spilled, you don't fuss, you don't like make a lot of eye contact and give a lot of big responses about that. Your response is completely different. Now, which of these is going to work specifically for your family will be up to you to decide, and you'll also understand more their motivation behind spilling water. But I do want to just give you some hope that they will move through this phase and that it does eventually end. Now, if you listen to this and you're interested in what I talked about schematic play and how we can really encourage that more holistically, not just for spilling behaviors, but for many behaviors, and also to really support our children's development and learning, go and check out the video that is on your screen now. We talk all about open and closed-ended toys and play, and I know that this is going to give you so much information about schematic play. I'll see you over there.